Happy October, everyone. It is Haunted Indiana, Ghosts and Strange Phenomenon of the Hoosier State, written by James A. Willis. Episode 30. Episode 3 of Season 3. And tonight is a very, very well-known classic in the Hoosier State. Skyles' Test and his House of Blue Lights. When he was alive, millionaire Skyles' Test was many different things to many different people. A successful businessman, an eccentric, an inventor, an architect. But he will be forever remembered for living in a building that is one of the strangest and most haunted places in Indiana, the House of Blue Lights. Born in 1889, Test had an insatiable appetite for learning new things. He wanted to know about anything and everything. And although he was an heir to the enormous diamond chain company fortune, he wanted to make a name for himself too. So as he grew older, Test got involved in several business ventures, all of which were successful. Most notably, his serving as president of the Indianapolis Motor Inns and his own company, Test Realty Corporation. All this meant that Test was a millionaire by the time he reached his early 20s. In 1913, Test married Josephine Dinges. At around the same time, he began buying up land around Indianapolis, including approximately 80 acres and a small farmhouse along what is today known as Fall Creek Road. This is the spot where Test built his dream home. But more than that, the ample acreage, as well as what appeared to be money to burn, allowed Test to fuel his yearning to create anything his heart desired. Test first set his mind to renovating the farmhouse. The most stunning additions were entire walls made of glass block. Over the years, Test built an amazing and mind-boggling series of structures on his property, and he even installed a miniature railroad that allowed him to travel across his immense tract of land. Knowing that winter weather would make it impossible for the railroad to run, Test built a series of tunnels that allowed him to move from building to building. But by all accounts, Test saved his best work for his swimming pool. Using a massive 40 by 80 foot pool as his starting point, Test decided he wanted to have several diving boards, all at varying heights. As far as he was concerned, having a simple ladder to get to the diving boards was the easy way out. So he built a multi-story bathhouse, complete with a basement. With the diving boards emerging from the structure, Test even installed an elevator to shuttle divers from floor to floor. But why a basement? Well, not only could the Test use to the house at all machinery for the pool, but because he had used glass block along the bottom of the pool, he could string colored lights below them, thereby illuminating the water at night. Test even developed a motorized surfboard for the pool. If there was one thing that Test loved more than inventing things, it was animals. While the property was at first home to just a few dogs and barn cats, the number of animals soon grew to well over 200. Rumor has it that there was so many animals that Test employed staff members whose sole responsibility was to feed and look after them. That job, of course, also required employees to take a very odd task. Whenever an animal passed away on the property, Test would have the employee place it in a casket and give it a formal burial in the pet cemetery located on the property, complete with its own little limestone tombstone with copper nameplate. It is said that at one point, just to make sure they were ready for any unexpected deaths, staff members had built up a stockpile of tiny tombstones and coffins. Needless to say, with all these unique and exciting things to see on the Test property, many people wanted to visit, so it's no surprise that the house became the site of many lavish parties, which Test and Josephine enjoyed to no end. They would decorate the entire property, especially during Christmas season, when Test wove endless strings of blue lights. Blue was his favorite color. Through the trees. But things were not all fun and games in the Test household. And as the years rolled on, Skyles and Josephine grew further and further apart. One Christmas in the 1930s, the blue lights went up and never came back down. Shortly thereafter, the couple divorced and Josephine moved off the property. And with that, all the components were finally in place for the birth of the House of Blue Lights. No one is really sure when the legend originated, but once it started, it spread like wildfire across Indianapolis. According to legend, Josephine had passed away, which sent Skyles into a deep depression. Unable to part with her, Skyles decided to instead keep her body at the farmhouse, entombed inside a glass casket. He often resorted to spending entire evenings sitting silently by Josephine's casket, overcome with grief. Further, it was alleged that the blue lights were Test's tribute to his departed wife, as blue was said to be her favorite color. In truth, Josephine was still alive and well. In fact, she would outlive Skyles by most 15 years. Still, local teenagers and curiosity seekers would sneak onto the property under the cover of darkness in an attempt to see the dead Mrs. Test. Lying in a glass casket. This gave rise to another rumor that Test had trained a group of attack dogs to stand guard over the casket and chase away trespassers. Even so, dozens of people still claim to have caught a glimpse of Skyles Test sitting quietly beside a glass casket, bathed in blue light. But just what were these people seeing? Were they simply mistaking one of the tiny caskets made for the farmhouse pets as one that housed Josephine? Possibly. But the caskets for the pets were made of wood, not glass. And as stated earlier, Josephine was still alive. So, what or who was lying in the casket? That was the question all of Indianapolis was asking when Skyles Test passed away on March 19th, 1964. And they got their chance to find out when it was announced that a public auction was going to be held on the property to sell off Test's material goods. When auctioneers arrived on the property to assess the situation, They were so overwhelmed with the amount of things that they decided they would need to hold a 3-day auction if they were to ever stand a chance of getting rid of everything. During that auction, it is estimated that more than 50,000 people crammed in onto the property, and while most were looking just to find a bargain, there's no denying that everyone was keeping their eyes peeled for a glass casket that might be holding human remains. And while there were huge stockpiles of foodstuffs, household items, and tiny wooden caskets, not a single glass casket was found. As for the blue lights, they were sold off to a buyer whose name remains a mystery. Tests will called for the property, including the farmhouse and all outbuildings, to be turned over to the Department of Parks and Recreation and made into a Boy Scout camp. After many years of legal wrangling, the decision was made to abandon plans for the camp and instead turn it into a nature park. In 1978, the test farmhouse and all the outbuildings, including the pool house, were demolished. But even the destruction of the house itself wasn't enough to keep the House of Blue Lights legend down. Although nothing remains of the house, visitors to the Skyles Test Nature Park have reported encountering something unexplained along its many trails. In the evening hours, the woods near where the test farmhouse once stood are said to come alive with the mysterious blue lights, which move throughout the trees as if they have minds of their own. There is also supposed to be one spot in a particular where it appears as if the entire area is bathed in eerie blue glow. I hope you've enjoyed this classic legend here in Indianapolis. Although I've never been to Fall Creek area, I plan to venture out there someday. So, that being said, please click that little bell icon to stay informed for the next exciting episode. The next one is another exciting legend here in Indianapolis. You can find me in all my social medias in the description. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to leave them. And on that note, I hope you have a good and happy October.